All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Marketing to Agents. As we all know, I think agents are becoming will become the biggest consumers on internet very, very soon. And this is a show that we are starting just to understand what are the different aspects of marketing or how will these agents behave once they are online. And yep, as always, I have Lalit, who's a thought leader in this space. And hey, Lalit, great to have you here and lovely to have this discussion today together.
Thanks, Ash. And this will be our recurring feature. So, really looking forward to having great discussions around how the space of internet is changing, how marketing itself is changing. Uh, just to start, I just came across this very interesting fact today that
Mhm.
the entire AI agent traffic, right, which includes the crawling, which is for indexing, and then maybe inference time, crawl, and also on behalf of a user if an agent is coming to a website, all of that bucketed together under the label of AI traffic, that is supposed to topple the whole human traffic on the internet by the end of 2026.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, as of June, it stands at 80% of the human traffic.
Wow.
Yeah,
Very interesting. So that means today there are more, or eventually there are more crawlers who are using the internet than humans themselves.
absolutely.
Perfect. Perfect. So I think that leads to one of the points that we were earlier discussing. So that means if the internet earlier was designed for humans, the whole concept of a website, for example, buttons to be clicked, if the primary user is going to be an agent now, I think the whole paradigm of how the information is presented, how websites are designed, will also change with that, I'm assuming, right?
Absolutely. I think the whole funnel, right from discovery of information, which is what we typically call as search, right
Yep.
from that to how people publish information, all of that has to change, right? Because agents do not have the limitations which humans had, right? As humans, we can, when we search, we probably are, it's not very not people not everybody is an expert in defining exactly what they're looking for, right? So
Oh, yes.
that's one. And then the SERP pages, search engine rank page, right? That used to be like the golden real estate, and if you are on the SERP page one, then there's a chance of you getting some traffic or business in that category. And because humans would never go past the first page, right? Very
Yep.
rarely you would go to, let's say, page two, right? So
True.
uh, and also the entire judgment of what is the information, is it good quality or bad quality, other than the search engines, humans
Yep.
had to go through the information and make the judgment for themselves. AI agents are actually a different beast, right? So first of all, they don't have any limitation on, let's say, how many, let's say, links that they can consume parallelly. uh, they actually can go up to 200 links, right?
Yep.
And they can basically summarize the information in a much faster way. So that is actually a different, as I said, it's a different entity on the internet. So how we
Mhm.
discover information, how we consume information, what do we expect from information is always going to change.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And this just created a thought for me that how was it when the first search crawlers came into picture? Like, what was there at that time? Of course, internet was much smaller, or the users on internet were too less. And I think that time the search crawlers would have been one of the key customers, and all the websites were also optimized for them. So I think just to your point, because these users are going to be different in their behavior, the way they're going to consume information, I think a very similar effort from a lot of businesses or people who are presenting their information on internet will have to be done where it's more consumable by these users.
Absolutely. And as we
Mhm.
speak, it has been a few years into this domain itself, right? So,
Yeah.
and there have been, uh, let's say, a lot of investments from major engines. So today, ChatGPT still is a market leader when it comes to the AI search, but their market share is being challenged by uh, Google again.
Oh, yes.
So So the market share of overall AI search, the ChatGPT share is right now at around 81%,
Mm-hmm.
81.4%, and it was actually 89% a year ago, and then from there it has declined.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
So there is a lot of focus on the search, or rather, let's say there is a technical term called grounding the information, because these models are trained with a knowledge cutoff date, right?
Mm-hmm.
And anything consequential that they are doing for the user, right, or for the enterprise, it has to access real-time information. It has to be grounded in actual facts, right?
Right.
So search is a very core primitive for agents. So from that perspective also, all major AI labs and major AI search players have been constantly innovating and heavily investing into making the search a lot more robust.
Mm-hmm.
And the space has been very dynamic.
Yep.
So what we knew as, let's say, uh, conventions and best practices that used to work in 2023 on ChatGPT, where it was just a simple RAG, right, where they would the model would actually call a web search tool and then summarize the top five results, right? From that point in time to now today, when we are looking at search itself is getting executed as code, right, which has its own dedicated sandbox. Very recently, just yesterday or just in this week itself, Perplexity launched search as code, right, where
Interesting.
the search intent of the user will be understood by the agent, the search agent, and then it would basically write the code which would basically have a lot more control on the search, uh, not the tool, but let's say the search index, right? Like for that query, what sources have to be ranked, uh, how many sources have to be obtained, what should be the filter, right?
Right.
And that output, from the search as a code, is then what is given to the user for rendering. So
Understood.
the whole paradigm has actually changed. Yeah.
So Lalit, now that you mentioned, so you mentioned a couple of things which I would love to double click on. So let's talk about the last piece which you mentioned about regarding perplexity. So as a business owner or as someone who has a website, who gets a lot of organic traffic on their website, what's an implication for them? Because if the way perplexity is now handling search, that means every search or every crawl by perplexity bot would be very different or would be very contextual to the search. So what does that imply for me if I'm a business owner and I have my own website? Like, how do you see that getting impacted, or how should I prepare for that sort of a future or that sort of a near future?
Yeah, that's a very important question. I think across the engines, whether it is ChatGPT, Google with the Google AI overviews and AI mode, and Perplexity, what is very evident is that uh, the the output is becoming very much citation led. What is meant by citation led is that the information that the websites should have, or the publishers in general should have, it should be unique. It should not be a second hand or a third hand information, because uh, because the crawlers would get to know that is this piece of information unique enough, or has that been, let's say, repurposed or reformatted from another source, because they're getting to crawl the entire internet, right? So they want to cite the original source as much as possible. That's one. Second, the search as a primitive is going to become a lot more personalized, right? So it would not be expected from the user to be ready with a very extensive prompt. It would be expected from the agent to understand the intent based upon memory, or based upon, let's say, the rest of the conversation. And the agent would make a lot of implicit assumptions about what the user's intent is. And what this would result into is the fan out queries will be actually long tail, right? It would have somewhere between 5 to 6, even more keywords, right?
True.
So it would not be, let's say, like a very short keyword, but
Oh
it
yeah,
would be
yeah,
a long tail keyword. It
yeah.
would be long tail keyword.
We're already seeing data coming out that a typical query right now. This is not, of course, this is user query. is at least 15 keywords when they do it in ChatGPT or in an LLM. But yeah, Lalit, continue. Yeah.
Yeah. So as a publisher of content, I think first is that we have to uh, first of all make sure that the information is technically accessible by the agents. So agents would highly value simple information which is presented in let's say easy to read, not JavaScript, or let's say not hidden behind, or let's say images, not much media heavy. In fact, there is this concept called token budget, right? So every website which makes it to the shortlist of the search tool, it is given, let's say, certain token budget, and anything that the page contains which exceeds the token budget doesn't make it to the context window of the summarizer, right? So it is very important for the publishers to basically create the most important, most valuable piece of the web page. It should be above the fold, in the first fold, and it should be extractable. It should be extractable as in it should be encapsulated in form of a question and an answer, or it should be self-contained with, let's say, required metadata, and obviously should not have too many extra tags which are unnecessary for the agent, right?
Agree.
And then as much as possible, it has to be contributing something unique which the agent can easily cite this website to.
I would, and because you started off this response by saying that because it's going to be contextual to that user. So I would also put somewhere that every business or every website should also start focusing a lot more on their persona or who's their ideal user, because the more they emphasize that or the more they talk about that, I think that way somewhere it will be a signal, because when those long tail queries are formed and then they come to you, if they see that the match is quite instant, or your answers, the probability of your websites or your answers getting picked may be much higher. So I think that focus can also be a good help for the businesses.
Absolutely. So in another discussion, I actually gave this example, and this very, very, very relatable example. Let's say you send an Instacart delivery person,
Yep.
or rather an Instacart, you order something on Instacart and you're not very specific about it, right? And let's say you are looking for a type of milk, right? You just said milk in your cart, and it did not specify whether it is almond milk or it is, let's say, organic milk, right? And the Instagram fetcher is basically in the aisle, and it is looking at, let's say, at least 50 options, right? Now, if the two things which are very important. First is your input to the Instagram, let's say, request. If it was more specific, the job of the fetcher would be much more easy, right? Second thing is, despite your instruction to the Instamart fetcher, even if you have been very explicit about what you want, but if the products out there did not have proper labeling, right? For example, although the milk is organic, but it does not talk about or does not explicitly say that it is organic, it would be very difficult. It would still be confusing for the fetcher,
Yep.
right? So what this example emphasizes is that as publishers, we are like the carton of milk sitting in the aisle, right? So the agent has reached the aisle, which means we have made it to the, let's say, the 200 set of links, which is then supposed to be analyzed for composing the answer. And we have to be very clear about what we are, right? If we are an organic milk, then we have to explicitly say on our packaging that we are organic, right? If there is any other benefit, any other differentiator that we have, for example, it's a organic, and let's say it's a specific animal milk, let's say goat milk, right? And if the memory of the agent tells us that this person, the end user would really appreciate this, your chances of making it to the cart for the user is very, very high, right? So
Right.
I think extraction of all the right information about your product, keeping your ideal customer profile in mind, having this very diligent extraction process of the internal knowledge, the product information from the point of view of the customer, and then making sure that it is very clearly written on the website and accessible for the agent is very important. That way, the chances of you making it to the long tail queries for the end user when the agent is visiting your website is much higher.
Right. Agreed. Agreed. And I have a funny anecdote on what you just, on the example you took. So I was speaking to a friend this week, and so this guy took about 2 hours, and he started his, so he wanted to buy new sports shoes, and he started his search on Gemini, and he bought it like to the very last extent, he bought it from Gemini, like almost from Gemini. So his search started from comparing three brands and what are different types of shoes. It kept going, it kept going. Finally, it got to a point where Gemini pointed him to a store where he can go get that shoes in next 1 hour at the most reasonable price in the whole region. So it was to an extent. So, and of course, Gemini being Gemini, Google could actually even get the inventory data. It could tell, okay, which store is carrying how much inventory of that product, and then which store has it available at what price. So to your point, exactly, the more data or the more marketable right data we can present, I think the more easier it is for these agents to find and then give users a very pointed answers. Because if the user is running their full journey, full buying journey on an LLM or with an interaction with a GPT, this would be very critical to have every data point possible and available. But I'll
Absolutely.
just one final thought on this point before we switch topics. But what if I'm a business and I try to be extra smart and I just fill my website or the first fold with all the information, like I overload it with information. So to your milk example, let's say I put organic, I put, non-fat or low fat, I put everything, which could be just right to my persona, but also a lot more information there. So that, oh, just to be greedy and, oh, I can be figured in 10 different categories. What harm you think can that do to my website or my ability for crawlers to come to me?
Yeah, I think
Is
that's a
there a
very
downside to that? Yeah. Right.
absolutely. I think so. There's a very important question, and this points towards the credibility of the publisher, right? The information source, and especially as a business, right? Businesses are not operating in a silo, and especially in 2026, where internet has a lot of user generated content, a lot of communities which are very authentically sharing information about, let's say, a particular brand, right? So the consistency with which the brand is mentioned, right, and the correlations, right, with which users are making that brand association with, let's say, what use cases, what features, right? So the times the more number of times the crawler actually comes across your brand in association with those keywords, it is going to try to make a very strong, let's say, indexation, right, with that topic, right?
Mhm.
And over and above, I think if a particular brand is making an inauthentic claim, right, which cannot be backed up with, let's say, a certification which can be verified, right, it will come up. You might actually fool, let's say, AI engines for the first time if it's a very new domain. But the moment, let's say, real users who have a bad experience, right, they come and share it on, let's say, Reddit or other social media, right? In fact, YouTube is a very important source of citations, right? Close to 25%, citations across on an average, right? Across all these engines are coming from YouTube, right? And that is where there's a lot of people like us, right? They share opinion about products. They sort of vouch for products. So all of that is going to contribute to the credibility of a business.
Understood. Understood. So what I'm hearing you say is that doing it too much would be detrimental, because then that means your correlation with certain categories automatically becomes weaker because you just spread yourself too wide. If you are very relevant for, let's say, two categories, focus on those two rather than spreading in yourself across 10 different categories, because then there is higher chances that LLM might not give you weightage for all the 10, or will think you a lower preference for all the 10.
Yeah,
So yeah.
I think one very easy mental model would be to go ahead with the assumption that AI engines would deeply understand the user, and they would want to deeply understand your business, right? So in that attempt to make the AI deeply understand your business, we should not be, let's say, like fake in terms of, let's say, publishing information which is not truthful for the business, right? For example, if a business is not, let's say, compliant on a certain standard, they should not pretend that they are compliant by publishing marketing content which cannot really stand the, let's say, test of time, or let's say which cannot really back it up, as a claim. Whatever is the state of the business, right, it has to truthfully describe itself in the depth which is best possible, right, for the business, so that the AI engines can deeply understand, right? So that would be the best way to think about things and move forward.
Perfect. Perfect, Lalit. Anything else? I think I know we've had a good chat here, but there were a few great headlines coming out this week. And anything that you would like to, you think we should double click for today? Something around, you did mention about ChatGPT's traffic share of AI referral traffic dropping to 81% from somewhere around 90% or 89%. Who's the one that you think is picking up, and what do you think that tells about the user preference? So is it because other models are getting better, or people have had too much of ChatGPT and they just want more variety? Is it different use cases? What do you think is causing that shift to happen? Like, is it just different services are getting better? But what's
Yeah.
your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I think two things that are happening, which is sort of taking away market share from ChatGPT. First is, I think Google is making a comeback, right? They have actually done a good job in terms of improving their models with Gemini. The latest Gemini models are actually state of the art, and they deliver a very satisfactory experience, right? Um, so that is one reason that the Google obviously has the largest distribution, right? And them doing even slight bit in terms of making AI front and center would obviously take away market share, right? The second thing is enterprise adoption of Claude, right? So for just B2B specific queries, the Claude market share has actually tripled, right? So for all the enterprise originating queries, Claude is basically growing its market share. So that is causing a decline. And for the consumer queries, I think Google is actually increasing their market share. So that is causing a decline.
Interesting. And as I saw a tweet storm sometime this week. So there is a company called Lindy, and they completely moved away from Anthropic this week to everything to DeepSeek, just because the cost of using Anthropic was getting so high. They moved completely away, shifted all their stack from Anthropic to DeepSeek. Now, I've not, of course, validated it, if they've really done it or not, but there was a tweet from one of the company leaders that this was a huge move, and they've been at it for a couple of months, but now the move is complete and they've saved millions on just their spends. So
Yep.
I think, and they vouch that while of course Anthropic is better, but DeepSeek is almost 95% there with their V4 model. So to your point, just to add to that, I think of course the models are getting better, and anyone who has better distribution, in this case of course Google, they are able to of course surface it at multiple locations and multiple touch points for the user. And yeah, and Google did another interesting thing, I think, which I was discussing, that they are now also using this opportunity that they have the users, they have the agentic layer. Now they are bringing it very closer to the commerce. So they've already been building Google Shopping, but now I think they are trying to make that front and center in agentic commerce space as well.
Yep.
I don't know if you have some thoughts on that. But what do you
Yeah,
think? Yeah.
absolutely. I think what Google is trying to do with um, the the Universal Commerce Protocol is actually a very strong indicator on how on how things are going to be in future, right? So one thing they've launched, in fact, they've announced in Google I/O 2026, is something called as the Universal Cart. Now, what this universal cart is that across all Google properties, which happen to be like quite significant in a consumer's journey, whether it is Google Search, YouTube, or let's say if you are on, let's say, Google Maps also, right? So So you can discover products, and you can then add those products to a meta level cart. When I say meta level, this is a cart at the Google account level across merchants, right? It's not a merchant specific cart. It's basically a cart associated to your Google account, and you can keep adding those products, and then your Google payments, right? Your Google payment will then for all merchants which are compliant with the universal, the agent payment protocol, the AP2 standard, right? For all merchants which are compliant, and Shopify, I think, is a partner there. Google will be able to make the payment on the user's behalf. Those agents will be able to make the payments, right? So that is a fantastic way to sort of give a great user experience, where I don't have to really remember like who the merchant was the moment I discovered the product. I can just add to cart, and and I can also set the instructions that I will buy this if the price is, let's say, lower than a certain amount, right? So all of
Wow.
those things is also possible.
Wow, Lalit. So that means that whole like last 10 years or last 15 years, the whole industry for optimizing the shopping cart or optimizing the behavior from shopping cart to buying journey will now have to be rewired for an agentic shopping experience then. So how do you ensure that the agent gets that information, knows all the right metadata or all the key highlights of that product, and then ensures that it's competitive from other merchants, and then allows the buying to happen in the most seamless manner. So I think that whole journey will have to be rewired. Of course, the website will remain, but then there has to be a backend layer which rewires it for the agents as well. So that will be a big opportunity area as well, looks like now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all these merchants would have to pay extra attention, and rather special attention, to the product feed, which let's say Google Shopping consumes or ChatGPT consumes, right? So the feed has to be very, very detailed, so that connecting to our earlier point of deeper understanding about your product, right? So the feed has to enable very deep understanding for the AI engine for the product, so that it can actually surface it for the right user, right? Where the conversion is much higher, right? And then all these merchants have to upgrade their payment infrastructure to support the agent payment protocol, which is also called Universal Commerce Protocol. I think there are like a bunch of names which are sort of synonyms. So, so I think these two things, if e-commerce merchants can, can sort of ready their stack for this, they can actually, ride the wave.
Interesting. And now that gives me just one last thought on this, is that as a brand, either I really become a brand which a consumer remembers and specifically asks for it. Let's say I want On shoes or I want Nike shoes, for example. Or if I'm a brand which is not yet so consumer recognizable, then I should anchor very strongly on maybe one or two values. So it could be, let's say, the most comfortable shoes, or the most best shoes for running, or the most economical option for running shoes. So something like that. I think because it has to really now very strongly anchor. So visuals, actually, that's another question I'll probably ask you now. How big a role will visuals play in an agentic commerce? We've seen all e-commerce sites, right? Or let's say D2C brands, highly strong on visuals, great models, great photography, great videos. Now, how does it entail in this whole agentic commerce? Does all of that carry any weight now? So if I have a brand, I have a sunglasses brand, and I've created great visuals, great photography, great videos around it. Does that even help my funnel if it's agentic commerce now?
Yeah, so there are two surface areas that we're talking about, right? So first surface area is where users are consuming content, which could be social or agentic curation, but that's like, like a newsfeed kind of an experience where
Yeah.
people want to, consume content, right? That surface area is obviously not where commerce happened with very high intent, because I'm not going to that product or destination to do actual purchase, right?
So
The
that's where
sec
the brand gets built.
Exactly. That is where the brand gets built. That is where, let's say, the affinity can be built. You can, your visuals can basically
Yeah.
establish an emotional connect with the right audience, right? And that sort of builds a recall also, right? And then the other surface area is your ChatGPT or your AI agent, right? Your could be your personal Hermes agent or your OpenClaw, where you can say that, or it can automatically, plan for you. For example, let's say there is a hike which is scheduled in the next month, and in some previous conversations, I might have said that I don't have proper hiking shoes, right? So the agent can maybe proactively, discover that there is a hike, and then maybe at least 2 weeks ahead in time, I should be able to, get a trial for some shoes. So it can then surface it up. So that surface area is where the visuals are not going to matter too much. But at the end of the day, as a user, when I am about to make the final choice, if a certain brand has been successfully targeting me, or let's say engaging me through the visuals on the first surface area, which is your newsfeed, right? It might have a much higher chance in terms of the recall, in terms of the affinity to go for that.
Fantastic. Yeah, massively changing paradigms, and I think it'll be more important. So feed becomes very important, but at the
Yeah,
same time, yeah, feed becomes important for brand building, and then the agents and optimize for the agent conversions.
absolutely.
Fantastic. And just your hike example, Lalit, one more small point on that. So let's say would let's say it's a hike that I'm planning to go, let's say next month, it's a famous hike. Would the system with the agents with the agent gets to a smartness level where they look at the photographs of all the users publicly available for that hike, see what they are wearing, what gear they are wearing, recognizes those gears or tags those gears, and then goes to those brands and gives me those options. Can the agent, so I'm just thinking that how does that content get utilized? So do you think that could there be a play where there is an agent which just does that kind of a work where they check this out, and then they bring those brands which most of the people are wearing during those hikes?
Yeah,
That has been
I think
interesting.
very much possible. This then boils down to the skill, right? The skill to research about a product, right? If the skill specifies that you have to look at, let's say, Instagram and look for not just reviews, but let's say, actual inclusion of the shoes in hiking photos, then definitely it will do that. Otherwise, most typically the skill would require them to look for proper reviews and go for the best fit. So,
Perfect.
uh, I have a few other things that I wanted to bring about in the discussion. So, first is I think Microsoft, in their very recent Build conference, they announced something called as WebIQ, right? So, WebIQ is their AI first web search stack, right? And this is particularly important for developers, right? Where, as we spoke earlier, right, that search is such an important primitive for agentic work. Like any consequential work has to be grounded in real information, right? So what WebIQ solves for is it sort of takes away a lot of, let's say, hassle in terms of making the content, let's say, agent friendly, because web, as we know, is a very visual medium. It has a lot of hypertext, right? It has a lot of, let's say, markup, which the agent necessarily does not care about, right? What it cares about is information which is in plain text and, in the most unambiguous and most consumable format, right? So the WebIQ encapsulates all of it. So it basically discovers, ranks, extracts, and packs the information from the websites ready for the agent. So for a developer, it's a 2.5 times faster. So as compared to, let's say, a typical web search tool, right? It would take X amount of seconds. So it is now 2.5 times faster to get the right grounding information from WebIQ. And WebIQ still uses Bing search index, but it doesn't give it's not the Bing search API that the developer is working with. So WebIQ still, let's say, hits the Bing search index. So it is important for businesses to make sure that their Bing search indexing is also happening. Bing crawler is allowed on their websites. And most importantly, ChatGPT has already started to use WebIQ.
So, Lalit, you're saying that this would be relevant for anyone who's building an agent today, instead of solving the search themselves or building a way to, really understand information on the website. They can just directly plug it into WebIQ and thereby get that whole already pre-index or the work already done by WebIQ and just plug into that for their search. Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah. So think of
Yeah.
it as a more advanced web search tool
Mm-hmm.
where the output is something that the agent can directly put in context. They it is not required to strip away extra information or extra tokens. So these it's a very
Mm-hmm.
token efficient output which the developer can directly put into the agent context.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay.
That's
And
very
then
interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
and for that again, just one last point on that. So for again, just coming from a brand owner or someone who owns the website or who's having their brand, like, does it have any implication on them? Of course, just complying with what Bing's API is, that's one part, or how Bing search works. Solving for that is one part, but anything additionally you think the businesses or the websites have to do for WebIQ just to be better at WebIQ?
Yeah, and so if you look at the emphasis that they're putting on, it's on the
Mm-hmm.
speed, right? So
Yeah.
obviously the website performance has to be good, and also the website content itself has to be token efficient, right?
Interesting.
So publishers should not be too verbose, should also be concise and compact in terms of, let's say, communicating the most important information, and as much as possible, let's say, discourage too much of, let's say, a flowery markup.
Clear. Clear. One example, Lalit, and then again on this part was that somewhere I heard either it was something from AirPulse or some or that Nike apparently uh, used to use all their product pages. So Nike has of course a lot of products and product pages on their website. What they did was for the crawler and then for WebIQ example, they had created a separate page for each product page, which was then given to the AI crawler. So instead of giving their regular product page, they had created a separate product page. As soon as they saw it's a LLM crawler which is coming to their website, they just created a different page altogether. Do you think that's a good strategy in general for businesses to adopt, for websites with large number of product pages to adopt, to be like just where you talked about token efficiency or helping LLMs to consume information quickly?
Yeah. So in general, I would say it's not a bad tactic,
Hmm.
but you should not totally rely on this bifurcation of traffic because you never know, right? The agent code can change, right? Tomorrow, ChatGPT might just have another, let's say, agent name, and then what you're doing is basically you're serving a very unoptimized page to that agent, right? So these names, as we have seen in, during the course of building AirPulse, we have seen, like newer and newer agents that we see in our data, right? So in general, if things were static, this practice would have been good. Uh, but it adds to the latency because there is some check that happens with whether to serve this page or that page. That sort of
Yeah.
takes away the efficiency of the page speed. So as much as possible, if you can stick to, let's say, the page content which is primarily optimized for the agent, we will be in the better territory.
Makes sense.
I want to highlight one survey result, right? So recently there was a survey conducted of CMOs, and this was around their ROI from their AEO/GEO efforts
Mhm.
and their, let's say, their intent of increasing the budget or intent of, let's say, doubling down. So it turns out that 90, let me just pull up the real figure, just one sec. So basically, close to 97% of CMOs reported that they got a positive impact of their AEO investments. And 94%, they explicitly said that they will increase investments and they are now willing to allocate up to 12% of their digital marketing budgets into answer engine optimization.
Wow, that's a huge tailwind for this industry, Lalit, right? That means
Absolutely.
that there are businesses, there are CMOs, everyone now thinking of this as a primary growth driver.
Absolutely. I think the rate at which the user behavior is changing right? And our increasing dependence on, let's say, AI engines and AI apps, right? So if you look at, a lot of knowledge workers are now spending a lot more time on apps like Claude Cowork or Codex, right? And much of the discovery of new services, new products, even data analysis, right, report generation, all of it happens through these apps, right? So nobody is actually going to, even ChatGPT for searching. It is, the search is happening through an agent which is part of your desktop app, or let's say it could be your personal, let's say, OpenClaw. So that rate of adoption has actually surprised everyone, right? So there was this very latent and very high demand for, let's say, getting a lot of work done which was cognitively taxing. But the moment these agents cross the threshold of coherent consistency and, let's say, doing long range task, I think a lot of work drastically got offloaded to them. And that is making it extremely serious that brands and businesses should look at their website and their whole discoverability and visibility for AI agents.
Absolutely. And I think one more trigger to that, with what you highlighted, one more trigger is people are actually seeing, like most of the brands. So I was at a conference last month, and 90% of the conference attendees saw a drop in their organic traffic. So the drop is real. And because organic was the place where most of the last 15 years of SEO, of people optimizing their website, of driving traffic, now as people are seeing that castle crumble, they are now trying to build, okay, what is then the next thing and what's coming up? So I think that's another thing which is definitely driving adoption, and people are thinking that, like, this is one of the key pieces for every business to solve eventually.
Absolutely, Ashwani.
Yeah.
And I think one very recent thing, just yesterday, like less than 24 hours ago, Google announced something called as Google Search Profiles.
Yeah.
Now, this is basically Google addressing the the growing universe of, or rather exploding universe of content on social media, right? Because we live in a world where social media influencers play a very important role in educating users. Like, a lot of our information comes from, let's say, some influencer talking about something, right? And all of that is not making it to, let's say, Google search, right? Or maybe even if it is making, it's not making it to the Google search index that easily, because these are behind, let's say, other walled gardens, like, let's say, a Meta ecosystem or a X ecosystem, right? So Google search profile is a way for, let's say, social media brands or influencers to build up a presence for Google, and then basically link up much of their posts on on other social media platforms, and sort of make it available for the Google search index. So this, I think, is a extremely power move by Google. And what it also points towards is that a lot of social content is going to start influencing search, because quite frankly, I think publishing has shifted to conversations, right? And
Yep.
conversations happen over video conversations or influencers talking to their audience, right? And it's only those conversations are getting then transcribed and making it to the written word, right? So it's I think it's a great step for Google to sort of make some accommodation for social media brands, and getting an entry into that universe of content.
Fantastic, Lalit. And I think that's a great segue for maybe our next episode. I have very interesting three, four anecdotes around that. I having just spoken to a few creators recently. Very interesting anecdotes and very diverse views there, because the creators are feeling sometimes left out, sometimes included in this whole agentic era, and how what's their point of view, and with Google's policies also, not Google, but I would say YouTube's thoughts also changing around that. So I think, yeah, that would be a great segue for something that we discuss next time, I would say.
Absolutely, Ashwani.
Perfect. Lalit, this was a great conversation. And I hope everyone listening in was able to get something valuable out of this. Definitely, agentic commerce agents are going to be a big consumer of internet. So optimizing your website, optimizing your business for that layer for that layer is going to be a critical factor in future too. Yep.
Thanks, Ashwini.
Perfect. Thank you,
Yeah,
Lalit. Big
thanks.
time. Bye. All right. I think let me stop.